Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast, bringing you interviews, reviews and fishing tips. Here's your host, Pete Tigers.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fly Culture Podcast. I'm thrilled to be welcoming back my guest today, who's been extremely busy since we last caught up. Aside from his acting duties, he has been co-presenter of Robson and Jim's Icelandic fishing adventure and has recently formed Activist Anglers that we'll be learning about a little later in the show. It's great to have Jim Murray back. Jim, how are you?
Pete, it's great to be back, mate. I'm very, very well, thank you. I'm very well. It's a glorious, sunny, bright, cold morning out there, and I just wish I was on the river. But apart from that, life is good.
That's good to hear. And like you say, those bright days kind of make us feel perhaps that season isn't so far away now. Our rivers down here open on the 1st of March. Are you sort of well, first off, I've got to ask you, is it okay to start thinking about that new season and perhaps get a little bit excited?
I think so. I start thinking about the new season the week after the old one finishes. But yes, it feels tangible, doesn't it? It feels like there's a hint of spring in the air. I walked down the Itchen yesterday, I live just on the Itchen, so I'm very lucky. And I walked down and I just started to sense some vibrations in and around the river and a sense of life, just thinking about returning. So yeah, why not? Let's get excited.
Absolutely. The snowdrops are out. All is good.
Yeah.
There might be a chance of a grayling or two before I start thinking about salmon and trout, but we'll give it a go. Are you the sort of angler, though, who sort of checks all their gear, gets everything prepared, and that's part of the process for you? Or do you sort of, the season comes round and, right, let's see what we've got here. I've got an old bit of leader on there. And what sort of angler are you?
I'm afraid I'm the latter. I think if I put it away semi-properly at the end of every fishing session or at the end of the season, then I'm going to discover it in the same shape that I put it away. And and I know that doesn't happen because you pull it out and the leader has somehow found its way tangled around an old coat, around an old pair of wellies, whatever it is. So I tend to grab my kit. Normally the first salmon trip, actually, I'll grab my kit and I'll go, oh, I'm in a rush. I'm going to miss the plane or whatever it is. I'll sort it out when I get there. And then I get there and I go, oh shit, I've only got a sink tip poly leader and we need a floating line, or I've only got summer flies. So it's all a bit of a kickbollock scramble, but luckily that's what fishing friends are for, isn't it? You beg, borrow, and steal of each other, and you can kind of cobble together a set. But I do occasionally get frowned upon by the more purists, if you like, and especially the gillies and the guides who just think I'm woefully underprepared and get very angry if I catch a fish.
Yeah, that's how I like it. That sort of style, as I said, old leader, all of that. I had somebody I was talking to the other day, actually, and they said they had new waders and they were sort of wandering around their house in the new waders. I don't know if that was to break them in or whatever it was, but I get that aspect as well. But I'm the same as you. Whatever the last bit of leader was, that's what I'm using. And if I can make a leader last a little bit longer, then I'm perfectly happy. But as time sort of marches on and we all get a little bit older, do you detect that you've changed as an angler in any way? The way, be it the excitement levels, the pace that you fish at, do you detect anything has actually changed?
Yeah, I do. It's interesting you should ask that. I think confidence is paramount, obviously, in fishing, as you always hear people say, just fish confidently. That's the most important thing. And more important than tackle, et cetera, et cetera. And I've suddenly found a new level of confidence. It may be wholly unwarranted, I don't know, but it manifested itself last summer. We were on the D, and we were part of the 24-hour, the brilliant 24-hour fishathon, where they all get together in different groups and they fish constantly for 24 hours to raise fantastic money for charity. We were very kindly they invited Robson and I to film there and to fish it. So, but it was June and the river was on its bones and it was very low and people weren't catching salmon anywhere, let alone the Middle D. And we only had a few hours on each beat, which were obviously thrashed to death by another group a few hours before and then a few hours before that. So it's not really about you're not expected to catch huge numbers, shall we say. Anyway, I was on this beat, and everyone said, "Oh, that beat's very unproductive at the moment, and there's been no fish caught in there all season." And it sounded pretty negative. And it was in the middle of the day. It was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The sun was blaring on the river, and Robson ran off upriver with a camera crew because the riverkeeper said, if we're going to catch anything, it's probably going to be in this one little pool that is just about hanging on for grim death in this low water. Jim, you just fish wherever you like down there. And the water was just, low and still, and there was very little flow and very bright and all the rest of it. So I thought, well, I'll just cast away. And I thought, no, this isn't fishy at all. And we were only there for an hour. And after about half an hour, there was a tiny slither of shadow on the far bank where the rocks dropped off. So there would have been a little pocket, a tiny little pocket that was probably half a foot, 6 inches deeper than the rest of the river, which is just very level. And I thought, well, if I was a salmon, and of course it's that age, you've got to think like the fish if you want to catch the fish. But I thought, if I was a salmon and the weather's been like this forever, and I want to desperately get upriver with dogged determination, but it's tough, I'm just going to hang out there because it's going to be cooler, it's going to be safer, all the things that they want with those conditions. So, but I thought, well, do you know what? If I thought that, every other bastard's thought that. But let's just put on a slightly heavier fly and let's just get in and approach it from this angle and start thinking technically and or having confidence in my technical ability, should we say. And first cast, I hooked into a fish, into a lovely, a beautiful salmon. So that was great. And I think that's a long-winded way of answering your question. Yes, I think as you get older, the more you fish, your confidence levels increase. And I think that is paramount to improving your angling.
Yeah, that's some nice skill as well. And thinking about it and the whole setup, right, I've got to change my fly. This is where that's how you catch fish, isn't it? And be it confidence, be it second nature, be it supernatural nature, whatever it may be, we know those things, don't you? And you can detect those things. And that is the difference, as you have perfectly displayed, about catching a fish and perhaps not catching a fish. And it is being observant and seeing those things, isn't it?
It is. And actually, I think the moral of that tale is river keepers, guides, gillies, call them what you will, are invaluable, and we should listen to them. And if we don't, it's to our peril. But sometimes, if you have a strong enough assertion about a hunch, that a fish is going to be there because of X, Y, and Z, like I've just described, then act on that. When I was a younger fisherman, I would have gone, well, no, the gilly said that this bit's dead, and so I'll just thrash around for a bit, then I'll come in, and it's Robson's bit or whoever, that's the productive bit. But don't, the best gilly in the world cannot tell you where all the fish are or aren't. They've got a pretty good idea, but fish will always surprise you in that respect. So go with your gut. If you've got a strong instinct about something, follow it, I think, when it comes to fishing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's some great advice there. And also on tackling stuff, given the first part of our conversation, I suspect I know the answer, but are you somebody who likes to start the season with something new, a quick browse through a tackle journal of some sort, or an advert online that gets your attention? You think, actually, perhaps a new rod or a line for the season. Are you one of those sorts of anglers?
I'm a complete fishing whore, in as much as I'll read the pages in Trout Salmon or whatever it is and see all the newfangled gear and why it's better than last season's, and I'll go, I want that. But like most fishermen, you go, well, I can't really buy that until the old one's knackered. And the problem is, whether it be a jacket or waders or a line or a rod or whatever, these things last a long time now. So to justify replacing them you can't. So you've just got to add. And there comes like tipping point in most people's houses, I'm sure, especially if they're in a relationship with a non-angler, where enough is enough. And, you can't cart all that stuff around. I like to travel light. So yes, I will. What I tend to do, instead of buying something, Pete, is I will find a little article in maybe your mag or all the other fly fishing mags or all the accounts on social media, there'll be a piece of contrary advice about, spring fishing for salmon or dry fly fishing for trout that catches my attention because it's contrary to what most people do. And I'll go, that's going to be my new piece of something. That's going to be my retail therapy that going into this season. I'm going to try that, and that's going to be what excites me. So that's what I tend to do.
That's nice. I know I've found that, tackle is getting so expensive that I found myself looking through some of these companies that sell older pre-loved gear and rods I've known and loved, or rods that I wish I'd have owned. And I've sort of been searching those out, and I found a reel recently, and I bought an 8-weight Loomis rod actually that I felt I should try just to see that I hadn't. And I found that very, very pleasing and a little bit different and a lot more cost effective as well, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know that existed. Thrifty, pre-loved fishing gear, because you're right, you fall in love with old models, don't you? And you know what? The best, there's a rod that of all my rods, there's one rod that's caught the most fish, and it's an old 7-weight 9'6" Sage XT. Would it be? Is that
XP?
XP. That's
XP.
It, thank you. Yeah. XP, and I've caught everything on that from like 25-pound salmon to saltwater fish, to local trout, to sea trout, to whatever. And the guy I bought it off, who's a good friend of mine, Lee Hooks, he caught the most fish he's ever caught on that. And there's just something about that rod. And every time whether I'm in Iceland or Scotland or wherever, and I bring it out, everyone goes, the XT, yeah, that was a great rod. That was when, everyone wants that rod, even though it's old news now. Isn't it funny? It's like, have we peaked and are we going too far? Have we gone too far into technical nonsense? I don't know.
Yeah, I think you could be right. And I think people are just saying they're actually, we've seen this growth in fiberglass rods, in bamboo rods that's always been there, but more so. And now people are saying, well, I don't particularly want to go down that route, but let's have a look at some of those rods. And the XP, like you say, is a much loved rod. They make good money still. And you're probably going to get your money back if you bought one of those and decided you wanted to move it on as well. So there's that sort of aspect of it.
That's never going to happen, but that's good to know.
Yeah, and they come around. I love the SP, which came out at the same time. It's a slightly deeper loading rod, and funnily enough, I've got my eye on a 9.5-foot 7-weight of those for salmon, sea trout, and stuff like that. So yeah, I may be looking at those very, very soon. So, but it's quite fun looking at those and thinking, yeah, actually, I always wanted one of those, and then
but it's like a classic car, isn't it?
It's
your midlife crisis. It's classic midlife crisis. It's an old motorbike or an old car. I'm going to get that old rod that I coveted 20 years ago that I could never afford, even though now it's half the price of a whatever Loop's newfangled thing is. But I'm going to go for that, and you'll have much more fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I want you to move on, and your day job obviously is acting. And I've had a number of musicians on this podcast and wondered if acting is similar in that the sense there is a band of fly anglers within angling that you're aware of, you fish with. Is it a similar sort of thing as well? My guess is they're all microcosms, but I'd be fascinated to know.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the one of the beautiful things about fly angling is it's almost like the Masons. Terrible analogy, but there's a knowing, there's a look in the eye, and if you overhear someone talking about fishing on set, your ears prick up and you go, "Oh, is it fly fishing?" And most of the time it's not, but when it is, you found a kindred spirit. And genuinely, over the years, I could probably count on one hand, maybe certainly two hands, actors that I've either worked with or I've been introduced. I mean, listen, I was introduced to Paul Whitehouse through fishing. It was just a mutual friend, who I was working with, a comedian. He said, "Do you know Paul?" And I said, "Well, I know of him." He said, "He loves fly fishing." And then they put us together, and then we're just on the phone for hours talking about fishing, whatever. But there is a small but hopefully growing community fly anglers. Every job I go on, I'm become a fishbowl very quickly, and people take the piss out of me for it, and that's fine. But actually, there's always at least one or two cast members that will quietly come up to me and go, "I've always fancied that. Can you teach me, or can you take me, or whatever?" I mean, on the Crown, which I'm working on at the moment, Dominic West was that person, and he ended up being in our next show, our next fly fishing show, as a sort of guinea pig of someone we teach how to fly fish. But it's so lovely because I think this may, at the risk of sounding a bit wanky and esoteric, artists such as musicians, actors, painters, poets, whatever, fly fishing, I think, that is in close alignment to that and appeals to the right side of the brain. Is it the right side of the brain, the creative side? I think it is, or allegedly. And I think, actors on the whole are quite creative people, and they're looking for that outlet where they can go and do something creative in nature, and at the same time, get positive feedback and interaction. And fly fishing gives you that. And in the Icelandic show, of course, I just remembered we taught Dari Olafsson, the fantastic Icelandic actor, how to fly fish, and he's still in touch, and he's fly fishing whenever he can. It's just they get the bug.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. I was thinking, actually, funnily enough, of the rod that we mentioned, there was a beautiful television program called Tales of the Riverbank, and it was introduced by Geoffrey Palmer. I remember him with a fly rod in his hand, and it was one of those Sage SPs, funnily enough. And I thought,
oh, was it really?
Yeah. And so I thought, yeah, he's obviously serious. That's his kit. And so I kind of like it from that point of view. And that segues beautifully onto your TV program because, it clearly has had an impact on the non-fishing community too. And you must have been incredibly pleased and proud to see that it was on mainstream TV. That's quite some achievement, isn't it?
Well, if to build in a bit of context to that, it's more than. We were very lucky, Pete, because what happened, and I'll try and keep it concise because it is quite a meandering story. But the pandemic happened, and just before the pandemic, Robson and I were talking to a TV channel about a fishing show, and I was trying to push it to. I said, "Listen, I'm only interested if it's fly fishing because I think there are enough fishing shows out there that are being done very well, and that's not my passion. But I want this to be about fly fishing, and that was a sticking point. And then the pandemic happened, and this channel said, "Look, everything's going to have to be put on hold for probably years, if at all. We're going to make this now because obviously budgets were being vastly tightened and what have you." So Robson and I, in our infinite wisdom, thought it would be a good idea to somehow get to Iceland, even though there were planes going, and there were planes predominantly taking Americans home via Iceland as they were being, evacuated, for want of a better word, so that they could be repatriated at home. And we jumped on one of those, and it was the fourth one. Well, the first three were cancelled. So we were waiting, they were being cancelled. It took us 2 weeks to get out there. We got out there. We happened to know a mutual friend of ours who was an incredible drama cinematographer, BAFTA cinematographer, award-winning cinematographer called Tim Palmer, and he loved fly fishing, and he said, "I'll do it for nothing as long as you teach me how to fish out there." So we thought, okay. Anyway, we went out with a skeletal crew. We borrowed some crew out there, some friends of ours who we'd done an Icelandic fly fishing show with the year before, and we got on all the rivers because all the clients couldn't get there, that's never going to happen again. It was incredible. We fished about a dozen of the best Icelandic rivers, made many friends out there. They just wanted to have us on because it was great promotion, obviously. And we were sort of quite economic about whether we'd had the show commissioned yet or not. But luckily, in hindsight, I can say now we hadn't. We were just going out to film beautiful footage of fly fishing for salmon and sea trout in Iceland. And I directed it, and I wanted it to be a very I wanted to show the poetry of fly fishing and perhaps the more spiritual side of fly fishing and what it had done for me therapeutically. And Robson wanted to tell his story. Anyway, we got 120 hours of fantastic footage. We got it back to the UK. We got a very good editor to put together this brilliant trailer, which was all very lyrical and stylized, and in no way two boys on a fishing trip like the ITV show that ended up coming out. And we took it round, as you do. Normally, by the way, for those who don't know, in the world of television, you don't go out. You get a commission first before you make the show, not the other way around, because that's stupid and risky and idiotic. But that's what we did, and we pimped it round to Netflix, Amazon, all the big streamers, and they were great. And they said, "This is fabulous, and it looks stunning, and I can understand the value and the appeal of fly fishing, but it's just too niche for us." So it's polite no, basically. Anyway. Luckily, our last stop saloon was ITV, and they brilliantly they got it and said, "We love it. We're going to have to make it how we want it." So that's what we got. We got 3 hours of a road trip of Robson and I, like the old couple, bickering our way across Iceland and catching these wonderful fish and chasing the salmon down. And is it here yet? That was the challenge, I guess. Has it come in yet to start to spawn, come up the river? So we luckily, and they said, but we're going to put it. It's not. We're not going to. They didn't say this, but basically, they didn't give it much love. They didn't give it any marketing. They buried it in the summer schedule at whatever time, and we were a bit disheartened by that. But hey, our show had been made and bought, so that's okay. And it went on, and it just did really well. And then they bumped it up to ITV1, and it did well on that. And yeah, so here we are. We've just completed the edit on our second series, which comes out in April 2023. So in a few months, and that's it. That is. We shot that last June in Scotland, Wales, and England, and there's 4 episodes, and it's great. I've seen them all, and they're really strong. Yeah, I mean, what I will say is June 2022 was not a brilliant month for anglers, for fish in general. We had that drought that just went on forever. We were mid-drought in June. So all the fish, all the salmon at least, were still waiting out in the estuaries, being picked up by the dolphin and the seals, which is just horrible to see. And the few that had gone through had gone straight up because they sensed that the river was low and it was get to safety as soon as you can. The trout weren't playing, so it was really slim pickings. We went out to the Hebrides. We fished the Spey, the Dee, the Deveron, the Tyne. We went to sea trout fishing on the Cothi, which is where the Cothi bumps into the Towie in Carmarthenshire in Wales. It was great. It looks fantastic. We've got fabulous guests, but we don't catch as many fish as we did in Iceland.
But it's more than that, isn't it? And I think people, because it must be a very difficult path to tread, because the first program or the first series struck me as a vehicle to show how fishing had helped you both, which you mentioned, but also you can go down it's a difficult path, isn't it, that you want to bring newcomers into it, yet you want anglers who fish to say, yeah, this is a fishing program. So that must be challenging in itself, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's always, for us, for Robson and I, more so for me, because he's a seasoned presenter as well as angler and all the other things he does. And I had to, you got to play ball. If they'd commission you to make a show, yes, it's a fishing show, but they want it to appeal to as a mass audience as possible, especially on a show like on a channel like ITV. So I'm constantly going, well, I want to tell the story of fly fishing and make it as pure as possible. And so there's, Robson's going, well, yes, but we also need to make it a family show if possible, and please the commissioners. So it is a fine line, but I think because of the push and pull between me and Robson, which manifests itself as sort of the odd couple. He's like my Auntie Ethel, I call him. I have to help him across the river, and he jumps up and down with joy at the sight of a fish. It's constantly, or so he thinks, oh, I've got one. Oh, yeah, I've got one. And, it's not, he's got the bottom. It's plain to see. But he's full of feverish excitement and boyish enthusiasm, which is so brilliant on the screen. It's gold. And then I think, perhaps if I'm the straight man that sort of gently mocks him and make sure he's got a fly on the end of his line, because he wouldn't have if it wasn't for me. Together we hopefully straddle that fence that it is a tricky fence, as you say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really enjoyed, like you say, the banter between the two of you, how that played out as well. That was pleasing. And as two guys who are used to being in front of the camera, when you have to throw wild fish into the equation as well, does that make you fish differently? Do you feel a little bit more pressure? Do you approach things differently? Yeah, it must be a challenge.
It is. It's interesting. When I first started on this, I've always, in recent years, always wanted to tell the story of fly fishing via television, because I just knew that it needs to be to look at visually. It's as exciting as it is to partake in, and it was a real ambition of mine. And when it happened, I was very excited, and I thought, well, this is great. I'm doing something that I love doing, getting paid for it, and I'm telling everyone, trying to get as many people involved as possible. What could possibly be better? But you're absolutely right. The pressure listen, the fish never turn up to the production meeting, and at the production meeting, you're talking about, we need, they're going, we need a fish on Wednesday afternoon, we need a salmon on Thursday, and if we could get a trout or two on the Friday, we're great, we can then leave. And we're like, oh, it doesn't work like that, guys. And so there was a lot of pressure, and there's always, the crew are wrapping at 8 tonight, and I'd be going, well, the ghillie said there's no point putting a hook in the water till 9 because the river's too hot. So we're just going to get nothing, and you're just going to get lots of pretty shots that you've already got, Robson and I casting away. But that's what you sometimes have to do, because there are rules, and there are unions, and you can't make people work. I would fish 20 hours a day, as would you, but a crew won't film you fishing for 20 hours a day. So the pressure is. You don't see it on screen that much, but it's not like going on a fishing trip. The catching of fish is important, but all of the stars have to align. You've got, think about it. When I caught that salmon that I told you about earlier in the podcast on the D, there were no cameras on me. So I'm yelling, and, I'm yelling up the river. I've got one. It's a salmon. And by the time they get down to me, that fish needs to go back, because it's a summer fish, and I don't want to over stress it. So, and they're going, oh, just can you reenact catching it and then play? I'm going, no, you can't. No, I can't do that. I mean, we could, but we'll end up with a dead salmon, which is not worth it. Well, can you just pretend? So it's all, it's stressful, Pete. It's stressful. Even me. Reimagining it to you now is bringing me out in hives.
I remember, obviously, in the series, that great big one you caught. That must have been pretty special then, mustn't it? And the relief from that must have been palpable.
That was absolutely. I mean, listen, we went out there to catch the fish of a lifetime, and we were fish solidly for 3 weeks, and we caught some incredible fish and some incredible salmon and sea trout. And Robson eventually caught, which was, I think that was the main drive, which was brilliant, because the script kind of write themselves. You can have a loose structure, but the fish tend to write the script, which is lovely. But we hadn't caught anything that maybe a non-angler would go, oh my God, that's incredible. And then on the last day, literally, as we say on camera, we were waiting for, the camera crew had wrapped, and we were having a lunch at the lodge. And the river keeper, Joey, said, listen, I reckon there's a big chance there's a pod of fish that have just come in and moved some fish that had come in a few days ago, and there was some big fish seen in that pod, and I think I know where they are. And so I'm like, let's go. And the crew were like, oh, no, we're wrapped and they're tired. And so I said, well, I'm going to go and I'll call you. And of course, there's no phone reception. So Robson came with his little handheld camera. It's like a foam. It's called an Osimo. It's like a GoPro on a gimbal. So the majority of the footage of me with that huge fish is just Robson filming me, bless him. And it's great footage. And then finally, it took me 45 minutes to play that fish because I was on the single-handed XP. But finally, when I landed it, that's when the camera crew turned up. So they got the fish and its glory and the netting and the releasing. But the fight, which is arguably the best bit, was all just, we didn't need a camera crew. We could have saved thousands. We could just have Robson with his little GoPro. And that's what happens, all the good stuff is caught incidentally. You never get what you want from a setup. It's always the stuff that happens between the setups that's worth catching.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder if the fish knew that. And also, if you do fish with a little less intensity, because there aren't people sitting on your shoulder waiting for that to I do wonder what goes down the line to the fish. If do you think there's something to that?
Undoubtedly. I mean, and again, there's no better way of proving that. And the story I've just told you, and in this season, I caught 2 salmon over the chute, one on the spay, one on the D. The one on the spay was caught at 10:30 at night when we were wrapping. And I just went, I'm just going to go down here because that looks fishy. Bang. On the D, I was on my own. There were no cameras on me. I had the freedom to be more confident and to go, okay, I'm going to go and try that little pool over there. Bang, fish. So yes, I do think what your mood is and what your energy is directly is channeled down the line and manifests itself in how that fly swings. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, mindset, I talk about it a lot on here, and I think mindset is a really important thing. And, for me, as a result of that, and I take a lot from my wife and how she approaches her fishing, it's all good. She genuinely doesn't care. She doesn't worry if a fish has come off. She doesn't worry about, and it's a wonderful mindset to be in. And I've tried to take that myself, and it works really, really well. So if a fish comes up, and I had the classic case, I hooked 1 salmon last year, that was it. And it came off and we saw it leap. It was, in good shape, 8-9 pounds, something like that on the tamer. And it came off and I was fine about that. And I've learned it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That connection, and you talk about the fight. Yeah. I fish for that line going tight. Everything else is bonus from there. I do like the connection of when you hold that and cradle that fish for just a few moments. There's a connection that runs incredibly deep, I think.
Yeah, it does. It's primal.
Yeah, it is. And it's the interesting thing where you use the word primal is that we're not going to whack it as well.
No, exactly.
So it is a different sort of primal. I don't know if that's primal plus.
It's a progressive primal.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a woke primal.
Something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and
but you're right. You're absolutely right. Those two bits are the most important bits. And listen, if you only get one of them, that's still gold, isn't it?
Yeah. And we put a shitload of hours in for nothing, and I don't care. For that one moment. I don't care, and I'll do the same. I'll start this year with. I've ordered a ridiculous amount of flies that I don't need. It's only fly box jealousy that a friend of mine, Mark, has most magnificent fly boxes, beautifully arranged flies. Mine look in a pile, and they're a complete mess and everything else. But I'm all ready to get my ass whooped again, and I don't care. For that one moment, if it happens, I don't care. So I'm fully prepared to go through all of that. So where's your first? We sort of circled more. We've touched on the itching, of course. But we've circled more on the salmon. Where's your first salmon trip going to start then this year? Where does your journey begin?
I'm lucky enough. It doesn't begin till May at the moment. Sadly, I was meant to be up on the D last week, but I couldn't because of you can't have your cake and eat it. Sadly, I'm learning you can't film. You can't be an actor and take all the fishing trips that you're invited on, which is frustrating. But so I missed the D last week. But I'm on the Findhorn.
Nice.
I fished the Findhorn for the first time last March, and I fell in love with it. And I'm going back this year in May with Robson. I think I'm going with Robson to a lovely stretch. We went to the Altara Estate last year. This year, God forgive me, I forget what it's called, but it's a 2-rod beat, and it's a lot of it single-handed, and it's very pretty, and there are falls and canyons and crevasses, a bit like Icelandic rivers, really, or some Icelandic rivers, and that's the kind of fishing. We all do a lot of standing in big wide rivers and swinging a fly, to where we think the fish will be, but this will be a bit more. There'd be a bit more hunting involved, I think, and that's what I love. So I'm going there. All I've got is there, and then I'm on the Spey, back on the Spey in June. That's all I have at the moment, because what we've learned, I'm sure you're the same. If you can be flexible with when you go fishing for salmon, especially nowadays, whereas before people are locked into weeks, aren't they, forever? And that's the business model. They go, I take the same week every year on this river. That's futile now. You've got to be, if you can afford to be flexible and wait for the call, or do your research and when, look at the forecast, find out the numbers, find out when fish are running, speak to anglers that have just come back. And then if you can pick and choose a little bit, I think that's going to increase your odds, because let's face it, it's not easy catching salmon at the moment in Scotland or anywhere, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're dead right about that. We're lucky that the river here isn't far away. If it's right, we'll hit it. And if not...
You're on the tour, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
So it's a wonderful little stream, even just from a trout perspective. I love it. So that's fine. And salmon, if it comes around, is a happy byproduct. So I'll take it whichever way it goes. So I'm perfectly happy about that.
Did you know that Henry Williamson used to live on the tour? Do you know who Henry Williamson is?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm trying to think where it was. It's further down, I think.
I think it was further down, but he used to write from a shed overlooking the river, and he wrote Target the Otter there, and he wrote Sailor the Salmon there.
Yeah.
In the days where the tour was stuffed with salmon.
Yeah.
and Ted Hughes used to fish there, didn't he, famously?
Absolutely. There in the Torridge. He lived in North Taunton, which is pretty much the next village along. The upper tour there, the upper tour, as I call it, is there. And I've taken people there to show them where he used to fish as well. Used to fish a bit further down from where we were, all over the place. And yeah, it is to me, it's a special river, and yeah, it means a hell of a lot to me. So yeah, I love it. But it's interesting, we've talked about connection of fish and what they mean to us. And last time you were on the podcast, I know when we first got talking, it was about the Cress Farms on the Chalk Stream up there that you'd been incredibly successful with. And things have moved on a little bit more, and Activist Anglers has come along, but that's born out of your passion for trout, salmon, and the water that they actually inhabit. Had you sort of reached a bit of a tipping point and said, look, enough's enough, I want to try and do something in a different way?
Yeah, well, it struck me, and I'm not alone in this, over the recent years. Listen, we all do our bit, and I've tried to make what little change I can from my little platform, with whether it be with local water companies down here in Hampshire, or my work with the Atlantic Salmon Trust, or whatever. But it struck me, and I've got to know all these NGOs and people that work in them and run them brilliantly. But it struck me that there's a lot of disparity, and there's a lot of compartmentalization, if that's the word, and we're all very split up. And there's someone over here that is shouting about one thing, there's someone over here that's shouting about the other, and they're all trying to get the same end result, but together they're going to achieve a lot more than separately. And it just struck me that we need, it's an old cliche, but all this energy that's facing the same way needs to be a lot closer and a lot more combined, and it needs to form some sort of collective. Now, I'm not saying here's the rub, or not the rub, but here's where awareness needs to be made. Anglers obviously are a huge, there are a huge number of anglers, as we know, millions and millions of us, and they infuse a huge part of these NGOs and make up a large part of these NGOs, which is great because, as we know, as you and I know, anglers are the custodians of the waterways and have been the original activists, if you like, when it came to pollution for years, for decades. But that they are now a target. From fish farmers, from agriculture, from any of these potential polluters, they're going for anglers. And you and I know they have a weak argument, but they're saying anglers are also the problem. In a nutshell, we have caused, allegedly the death of millions of wild salmon and all the rest of it. And we're a cheap shot. So we've got to be careful that these NGOs aren't just run by and for anglers, because I think it doesn't just put a target on our back. It also means the non-angler goes, well, that's just for rivers are just for anglers, fish are just for anglers. I'm not interested in that. And I think it has to be a lot more holistic and reach a lot wider audience. So there's that argument, which I think is gathering pace. I mean, it certainly is if you read the press, and there's huge topical zeitgeist around pollution and private water companies and all the rest of it, and it's great. And I think the existing government are sleepwalking into defeat, which I'm sure is a good thing, but by not addressing it properly and underestimating how much people care about our waterways beyond anglers, finally. But that said, anglers still aren't being given, I believe, the platform that they need to be given, because it's not just because they want, yes, for some anglers, it's just because they want more fish in the rivers and the seas for them to catch. But actually, like most human beings, they have compassion for their environment and they want to see it thrive rather than suffer as it is at the moment. And we are a huge body. And I think we need to be respected and to be counted as such by the government. As Matt Hayes said to me the other day, it's time for the most significant potential lobbying group in the UK to flex some muscle. And I think it is. We are a huge united front if we get together, and we will demand to be listened to. So there's that, but also what can we do together apart from be heard and try and change policy? Well, if we're more of a collective, if we all become more activist as anglers, we can strengthen the campaigns that are already out there. We can report pollution and abuse of rivers in a much more robust and strong way, because we know that the EA sadly fails most of the time when it comes to that. So if anglers pick up the slack, then we can directly feed into NGOs like Fish Legal, for instance, who are affiliated with the Angling Trust, and get things done and potentially cut out a lot of the bureaucracy and affect change much quicker. And it just struck me that there are so many anglers, yet there's no collective for them. And I'm not talking about some militant Bolshevik movement, but I am talking about if there's an angler, let's say up in Penrith, a young guy or a young woman who's fishing, and she sees something on the riverbank that she needs to report, but she doesn't know how to do it. Well, she's an activist angler. She's going to go to the Activist Angling website, which will be set up under the Angling Trust banner. And she's not just going to learn about how to report that and get in contact with the NGOs that might be able to make a difference, such as aforementioned Fish Legal, but she's also going to learn about how she can volunteer, where she needs to go, who she needs to contact with regards to improving her fishing, improving her angling club, improving her waterways. So there's that. So there's getting involved with the campaigns, getting involved with the volunteering work, and bringing awareness and reporting the terrible pollution that's going on. It just, in my mind, it's a very simple. What am I trying to say? It's a pinboard where you go to stick on your case and go, look, today at 4:40, I saw this happening. So we can all share that information. Hopefully, something gets done by it. Or I really want to help more on my river, but I don't know how to go about that. Oh well, I'll go to the activist anglers, and they will point me in the right direction. So that's what it is in a very big nutshell.
And that seems exactly what we need. I must admit, I'm in the more activist, slightly more stir up the shit. My year has been made that I met somebody at the. They took some photos for the payout and the pollution on the mole, which was not great news. And somebody came up to me and said, "Oh, you write a bit and you're an activist," and that's my year made from that point of view. But I think you're exactly right that a lot of people just want something or somewhere that they can go that is easy to access and they can get that information and act quickly, which I think is a fabulous idea and I applaud deeply. Tell me about salmon for a moment. Are we on the brink of no return?
That is a very burning question. I'd love to say no, but sadly, increasingly, I think certainly the next 5 years are going to be incredibly important, and the data that we're going to receive from the various projects that are working away from the NGOs out there are going to be very revealing. I mean, we need to be doing something, and we need to be doing something a lot more. We need to be doing a lot more than what we're doing right now. Is beyond doubt, that's for sure. The apathy that is out there, it seems to me, from governments that can make a difference is astounding. And I'm praying and hoping, as I'm sure everyone is, not just for salmon, not just for rivers, but there needs to be a massive change in policy and a change of guard, whoever that may be, in order to get rid of sadly, the terrible apathy and the state of people's sort of moral compasses and ethics. I don't think it's their fault. I think everything comes from the top. And if you see your leaders behaving, with duplicity, and you see nothing being done, and you see all your rivers flowing with effluents, and your coastlines, you're not allowed to swim. I think it's time for change, and I think the salmon is just a great flagship, iconic keystone species that represents all of the above. I mean, it is going to go. The wild salmon is going to go from our shore, from our rivers and oceans, probably in our lifetime, unless big change happens in the next 5 years. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, it's my concern as well, I have to say. And if we've got somewhere, it's as simple as that salmon fishing in the Yemen, where the politicians looked at the amount of anglers and said, actually, that's votes, then perhaps they might start to do that. And that's where I see your campaign comes in, that if we've got one united front that is representing a mass of people, then that mass, I think, will be heard and listened to by higher office. That's exactly what we need, isn't it?
That's exactly what we need. And whether that be, become an activist angler, and just to be clear, there is no, you can become an activist angler overnight, like you have, like I have, like many people that we know have. There is no test, there is no membership, there is no recruitment. So I'm not asking anglers to jump through hoops or to part with money. I'm just asking them to become more active. And if they want to know how to do that, then they need to go visit the site or go to Twitter or Instagram, and that's at Activist Anglers. It's very simple. So that's all that needs to happen. But you're right. Yeah, I think as a group, as a collective, we are huge, possibly the biggest in the country if everybody stood up to be counted. And the fact that the government seemingly ignore us, and we don't have a decent representative. Maybe in Fergal, of course, Fergal Sharkey is our leader, if you want, in as much as he has the ears of some of these politicians, but he's not on the inside, and that's great. We don't want him to be, but we don't have anybody fighting our corner, ergo fighting for the rivers and oceans in Parliament, which in 2023 in the present state of our environment, to me, is just outrageous.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do need the way that I've seen it, and the little thing I tried to do to try and help as well. That just tiny little thing with the leaflets and everything else was to try and engage the
Right.
wider community to let them know what's happening, because my belief is that they can see just they see these things and then the next thing on the news comes up or whatever. We've just got to be consistently in their faces. And my motivation for the leaflet thing was purely to say to anglers, look, I knew we weren't going to change anything, but it was to say, look, we can do something about this. And I hope what you're setting up is the next logical stage to say, actually, come and join this. If we can grow this enough, if we can make the voice loud enough, that may, like you say, at governmental level, bring those people into play. But I think also we really need to bring the non-angling public into this,
Yes.
Be it the surfers, be it wild swimmers, just the wider public, to say, look, there is an issue here. Are you aware of what this is? That would help, I guess, and perhaps even grow people who aren't anglers into your organisation as well, hopefully.
Well, it's interesting that you use surfers, because if you look at Surfers Against Sewage, which is a brilliant model of an NGO that has originally it was a bunch of surfers, and everyone just went, well, that's just a bunch of surfers who don't want to paddle through shit. And then 20, 30 years ago, whenever it was formed, and now it's a leading NGO that has thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, I'm sure, followers, that but majority of which aren't surfers, and they have become the voice pretty much of pollution when it comes to our coastline. So yes, we do need to appeal to beyond anglers, absolutely. But there's no reason why anglers can't be the people that bear the flag, just like surfers bear the flag down on the coast, because we listen to the surfers because we know they're out there day in, day out, every month of the year surfing. So we trust that what they're reporting is the truth, and it is. Anglers, we're out there day in, day out fishing, and we're not just about fly fishing. All anglers. I mean, anyone from a child that's crabbing in a rock pool to your man that's out in Patagonia, fly fishing for sea trout, and everyone in between. If we're out there being the eyes and ears of the ocean, hopefully the non-anglers will put their faith in us and go, well, or more faith in us, shall I say, and say, well, what they're saying and what they're seeing ain't great. So I'm going to take their word for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the perfect case today was, somebody sent me something this morning and said, have you seen this? And it was Gordon Ramsay's new cookery program is sponsored by a salmon farm company. What the fuck? What is that all about? And the problem is that the public won't see that. And we've got to fight against that as well. So, we're busily trying to let him know. And I don't know how these things work, because people are sort of blaming him, but I'm guessing it's either the TV company or it is the production company that are taking that, not knowing what that is. Yet he should be a little bit aware of what's going on, shouldn't he?
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there, Pete, sadly. I mean, I have a hunch. I don't know, but I know how these things work a little bit, and it will probably be the commissioner, ITV, who have agreed to go into some sort of sponsorship deal with Maui, who we're talking about. And obviously, they've got Gordon Ramsay, who was a big name, to front another cooking show. So, happy days. They've got the money to back it, and they've got the star to sell it and get the figures. But it seems the compliance or the lack of ethics there, somebody has dropped the ball, because I do business with ITV, with the fishing show, and I've worked for them in the past with drama, and they're pretty, especially recently, they're pretty, we had to jump through a lot of hoops, shall we say, on this fishing show to make sure a lot of progressive boxes were ticked. So when I got that information with regards to Maui as a sponsor of one of their shows, I was a little scratching my head a little bit, because I think someone somewhere has dropped the ball. Because I think had someone said to the powers that be, listen, Maui represent this, and that's a very that's a hot potato at the moment, and can cause a lot of polarity. Who knows? maybe they did, and maybe they went to Gordon and said, "What are your thoughts?" Because fundamentally, we're selling you and your brand. And he may have said, "I think it's fine, but I do know that he fishes." He once gave me some great advice down in Cornwall. I bumped into him, and he gave me some great advice on where to go fly fishing. So I know that he knows his fly fishing. So you would have thought he'd be aware of the issues with the salmon farms, but I don't know. I don't want to cast aspersions, but I'm very disappointed, certainly like you, to see that news.
That's beautifully and eloquently put, Jim. I'm going to be a little less eloquent and say, look, he's on Instagram. Yeah, he's on Instagram. He's on Twitter. If you look at my personal Instagram or Twitter, there is a picture you are more than welcome to use saying that the salmon farm are sponsoring his program. Why not tag him and let him know what you think about it? And I think we've got to do this sort of stuff. Otherwise, and not sign petitions and shit like that. They do work, I know, to a degree, but we've got to do other stuff, and we've got to be more in people's face. Now with social media, we've got something where we can do this. And so please, 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 if you fancy doing it, just tag him in there and let him know, because I'm sure somebody somewhere in that chain, he probably isn't looking at this, but somewhere in that chain, that news will get back to him. And if that voice is loud enough, then they will have to listen to it. Even these small little things that we can do to stir up some shit will help. And I don't care about that. We need to do this now. We're seen as genteel folk, certainly fly anglers. Let's show them, yes, we are. We care about our waterways. We care about everything else. Yet, if we need to be stand up and counted, let's do that.
I think that, do you know what? You're absolutely right. And we need to flex some muscle. Maybe I was being a little diplomatic because I don't know what. I think you're right. I think there is a fine line, though, and I'm learning this with some of these fish farmers, especially on social media. They're very aggressive and they have very two-dimensional bullying ways in which to try and troll you and blame you as an angler for basically their dirty business. But in the same breath, I think there needs to be a healthy balance of the slightly more antagonistic, if that's the right word, activist, but also then there's room for, okay, let's talk. You educate me and tell me why you think, Mr. Fish Farmer, why you think open cage pens are okay, and why you think that it's complicated for you and perhaps too expensive to invest in closed containment pens for your farm salmon. And I will listen, and we will put that to the world, to the other anglers and beyond, and we will make a decision. So I think you're right that there's room for both. We need to be a bit diplomatic. I think also Gordon Ramsay, just going back to that, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I think it's only a matter of time before someone has a word in his ear and says, listen, mate, what you stand for and who you are, this isn't cool. The jury's still very much out, even if you're on the fence about fish farms, and to be, and to be in something that they're being sponsored by is not the best message for someone that's supposedly about environmental issues and fishing and rivers and oceans as much as anything, and sustainability, which I think is one of his big ones, as much as anything else. So I'm confident that the right thing will happen with him. But you're right, it shouldn't be out there in the fucking first place. That's the issue.
Yeah, I'm sort of with you on that front as well, that I don't think it's him behind that, but if we can use him to affect change, that's what we've got to do.
It would be great.
Yeah.
If we can get him as an activist angler and beyond, just somebody that cares and is vocal about our rivers and oceans, then brilliant. The bigger voices, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jim, we've spoken for an hour now, and I feel like there's more. I'm going to start ranting before too long. So
you're going to start shouting at your screen.
Yeah, but I'm on pretty good behaviour at the moment. Can you, and I urge people to follow these handles as well. Let's get some shit done. And so, Jim, how can, I know you've mentioned it already, how can people find activist anglers?
Well, listen, what I would just finish with just reminding everybody who's listening to this to tell everybody and spread the word that a little drive and passion can translate into a lot of action. That's what Activist Anglers is about. Is together we can make a difference. If you're just one voice, but if you form a collective and we're all facing the same way, we really can affect change. I've seen it firsthand, and the way to do this is to learn more about us as a community is to follow us on Twitter or Instagram at Activist Anglers. That easy. And there will be, we're constructing a website at the moment, which is going to be under the umbrella of the Angling Trust. And that will be, by the time this podcast goes out, hopefully, or very soon after, that will be there. But first port of call is social media. And let's build upon that and let's grow it into something really big and important so that we can affect the change that we so desperately need.
Jim, that's great work.
Thank you, Pete.
Thank you so much for being a guest, Jim. It's been great to catch up. Your passion and love for our pastime on many levels is inspiring. I wish you great success with the second series and with your coming season. And thank you for being a guest back on the Fly Culture podcast today.
Anytime, Pete. Anytime, mate. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much to everyone out there who's listening who wants to get up and make a difference and become an activist angler. It will make a difference, I promise you.
What a great way to end. Everyone, this has been the Fly Culture podcast. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this one. I hope this has inspired you. And I know I talk about these things many times, but if we can get up and do something about it, then possibly we can make some change. And that's really, really important to me. So thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Fly Culture podcast.
The Fly Culture podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter.